All right. Where am I? Where am I? Hello. Hi, everybody. This is Skip Elsheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show, where we watch old 16mm films, and it seems like we have a nice, supportive community. Rick just mentioned that he lost his job, and everybody reached out and to offer their support, and I appreciate that. Thank you. That's very kind. It's nice to know that we have such a great community that's supportive. So thank you for that kindness. And we love watching old 60mm films. That's the other part of it. So thank you for doing that. Unfortunately, yesterday we got the news that Bob Newhart had passed at age 94. If I reach age 94, I will be happy to have passed at that point, because that's a long time. And so I love Bob Newhart as a kid, watching the Bob Newhart show. I didn't watch Newhart as much because it was on when I was doing other things. I was in college. But I rewatched the Bob Newhart show during COVID, and it was a wonderful release. Although that last season is no good. Don't watch that. And I don't always get to do this. When we find about the passing of someone, sometimes I have the ability to go find a film that features them. Sometimes I don't. So when Shelley Duvall passed away, I didn't have the ability to find the film that I have that she's in, which is a long film. It's like an hour-long film. But yesterday, I just happened to be en route to one of the storage units and found this film behind me, which I couldn't find online anywhere. So this is a Bob Newhart film, and it's made for, I believe, Southwestern Bell or AT&T. Made in the late 60s. It's called, did I change the name here? No, I have not. Let me change it. It's called, I'm going to say it as I type it, I Rather Like You, Mr. Bell. And what's interesting is that this is, I watched only like 5 minutes of it, but this is kind of a love call to the technology that is the telephone. And Bob Newhart was the master of the one-sided conversation. So much of his, many of his routines involve being on the telephone and having this one-sided conversation. So this seems apropos. So here it is. I Rather Like You, Mr. Bell. We miss you, Bob, and you gave us great joy. Enjoy.
Hello, Bob Newhart. Oh, hi there, Mr. Bell. No, sir, I didn't say that. No, I just said the invention wasn't perfect. Well, as a matter of fact, it isn't a telephone at all. It's just that some people have trouble knowing how to use it. But, no, Mr. Bell, I rather like you, as a matter of fact. No, I like the telephone. I think it's much better than those other inventions. Much better than dental floss. And padded goalposts. Much better than paper bikinis. Much better. 15 calliopes. Yes, Mr. Bell. Well, thank you, Mr. Bell. Goodbye, Mr. Bell. That was Alex. I promised him I'd tell you about his telephone. It's really a remarkable invention. You know, not only does it make it possible to talk to just about anybody, anywhere, anytime, but it can also take a mild-mannered accountant from Chicago and transform him into a mild-mannered sort of celebrity like me. I mean, George Burns has his cigar and Jack Benny has his violin. Me, I've got the telephone. The whole Bell system is a straight man. But you don't have to be a comedian to get the telephone going for you. It can be a profitable tool that this film is all about, to show you how you can increase the effectiveness of your telephone service by following a few simple procedures. But as you probably guessed, we're going to have a little fun with it. With the help of the Bob Newhart Ring-a-Ling and Historical Society, we're going to pretend that the telephone has always been around, and we're going to recreate some of history's most colossal flops. Oops. And then we're going to see how things might have been different if proper telephone procedures had been followed. Excuse me a minute. I'm expecting a call from Nick, the Greek spy who lived at the time of the Trojan War. Hello, Bob Newhart. Hey, Nick. Yeah, what's up? I should beware of Greeks bearing what? Greeks bearing gifts. Why should I do that, Nick? Because of the giant horse. It's how big? It's able to leap the Colossus of Rhodes in a single bound. And it has what in its stomach? a bunch of guys with sharp spears. Well, that kind of explains how it's able to leap the Colossus of Rhodes in a single bound. What are soldiers doing in the horse's stomach, Nick? They're going to sack it to Troy. How are they going to do that, Nick? They're going to hide in the horse, and when the horse is inside the city, they're going to sneak out and burn and pillage and wreak havoc. It won't work, Nick. Well, the guards will see them. I mean, a bunch of guys with sharp sticks climbing out of the stomach of a giant horse kind of catches the eye. Why won't the guards see the soldiers coming out of the horse? They're going to sneak out the back. And all the Trojan guards will be looking the gift horse in the mouth. Okay, Nick. Yeah, I'll give him a call. Now let's see how things might have worked out if the Trojans had been warned about the Greek strategy. You know, it's easier and faster if you try to look the numbers up in your directory before you call.
Good morning, Trojan Defense Ministry. Who's in charge of preventing the sack of Troy by a giant horse? Oh, that would be anti-cavalry. Just a moment, I'll connect you. Some nut with a story about a giant horse that can leap the Colossus of Rhodes in a single bound.
How many times have you done that? You cover the phone with your hand to say something you didn't want heard on the other end of the line. Well, it doesn't work, so you can start being embarrassed about all those times you've done it. Sound will travel through the receiver as well as the transmitter.
Anti-cavalry chief speaking. Speak now, forever hold your horses. A giant horse full of guys with sharp sticks. Oh, no, you don't want me. You want S, L, B, R, and C. That's scaling ladders, battering rams, and catapults. Operator. Give this man S, L, B, R, and C. Or maybe D, M, and D. That's division of moats and dungeons, mister.
Maybe you recognize this as is the first stages of the great Olympic transfer game. Now, whether it's an insurance agency, a bank, a department store, or the Trojan Defense Ministry, when a caller gets shuttled from one department to another, it's like saying, we don't know who's in charge of what. To the guy on the other end of the line, it makes it seem like your organizational chart must look something like a confetti omelet. Nothing travels faster over the telephone line than the reflection of disorganization. So unless that's the image you want to reflect, make sure that your calls are transferred to the right people the first time. It might save a contact, a client, a customer, or even Troy. You know, it's the little things, like from the littlest acorn the mighty oak tree grows. And some of the little things we do wrong would be so easy to correct. Crazy little things like,
Good morning, Trojan Defense Ministry. Just a moment, I'll connect you.
Mr. Demosthenes' office? Yes, he's here. Just one moment, please. It's for you, Mr. Demosthenes.
Hello? Hello? Relations, please, speaking.
little things like talking with a mouthful of cigars or pebbles or gum or guppies, or not holding the phone close to your mouth, but not too close, like this, or shouting like this. Always try to speak in your normal voice as naturally as possible. After all, the name of the game is communication. So you see, it's the simple things we most often do wrong. For instance, well, like not answering your own telephone.
General Washington, the situation is looking absolutely grand. Better than I had ever dreamed. General, I believe that the Revolutionary War will be terminated by week's end.
About the only thing that could stop us now is treason. Some treasonable act from within.
Then you have nothing to fear, General, but fear itself.
Say, would you get that for me, Benedict?
See what I mean? I can't emphasize enough how important it is to answer your own telephone. Not only can it shorten wars, it also eliminates all sorts of misunderstandings and mix-ups. And it's a courtesy the caller appreciates. If you answer your own phone, you're always on top of the situation. Here's another important point. Whatever business you're in, when answering the telephone, think about the person calling. What kind of identification would be most helpful to him? Excuse me. Hello, Bob Newhart. Calling from where? Jericho. Yep, put him on. Hey, Sal, how are you? Sal, I can't hear you for all the racket. What's all the noise? Jericho is under siege. How big an army, Sal? 7 guys. They've got trumpets. You've been nipping at the old goat skin again, Sal? You say they're blowing the trumpets. Why are you going to put me on hold, Sal? The walls are what? Sal? 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 And you know what happened. Old Sal just committed one of the classic telephone goofs. He left the line without explaining why. Now, why couldn't he have just said, "Excuse me, Bob, but the walls of Jericho are tumbling down and I've got to put you on hold for a minute"? It's like when you're talking to someone face to face, you never walk away without giving them a reason. So if you must leave the line, always say why. Again, it's just a matter of simple courtesy. Another thing, if you're going to be away from your office for a while, always leave word where you're going and when you'll be back. How often have you seen this scene played?
Good morning, Trojan Defense Ministry. No, sir, he isn't. No, sir, I don't. No, sir, he didn't. No, sir, I haven't. No, sir, we don't.
See how foolish it makes the poor secretary seem? Now let's try another office.
sons, off-seasonal foremen, wells dried up and crops plowed under. No, Mr. Van Winkle's not in at the moment. Yeah. Went up to the Catskills to whoop it up with a bunch of elves.
Sometimes the truth sounds kind of strange. I mean, if you want to play golf or bend an elbow or go bowling with a bunch of elves, well, you don't have to say that. But do say something, and do say when you're expected back. Again, it's good business and common courtesy. And it's amazing how often those two things go together. Now, if everybody thinks everybody already knows how to use a telephone, watch the Newhart Ring-a-Ling Players prove everybody wrong.
We want Lady
Friends, our moment of truth has come. It is time to put our philosophy to the test. Tomorrow, the Lady Godiva Society, for the pursuit of justice through showmanship, will act. We've tried everything. Sit-ins, marches, letters. Nothing has brought results. So, if the taxes in Coventry are not lowered by tonight, then tomorrow I shall ride bareback through the streets as my husband dared me. Now, we shall give them one last chance.
No, we don't give them a chance.
I shall call my husband, the Lord of Coventry, and give him one last opportunity to lower this awful, awful tax. Miss Smythe, telephone, please. Thank you. Place a call to my lord. Try to contact him before he leaves the office.
Now, anybody who doesn't place his own call is saying one of two things. Either I never did learn how to use the telephone, or he's saying I'm more important than you are. See, my secretary can get you on the phone, and you're going to have to wait until I'm good and ready to talk to you. Now, that's groovy, if that's what you want to say. I mean, if you want to put down your boss or a client or a customer, this is the ace #1 way to do it. And often the communications battle that follows is something awful to see. You could call it the Great Secretarial Holy War. You know, where neither one wants to put her boss on first?
Good morning. Lefric, Earl of Mercia and Lord of Coventry in the reign of Edward the Confessor's office. Miss Stonehenge here.
Hello, ducks. Lord of Coventry there.
I'll ring the Lord of Coventry. You may put Lady Godiva on the line.
Right-o, ducks. Is the Lord of Coventry on the line?
The Lady Godiva.
Lord of Coventry.
Lady Godiva.
Lord of Coventry.
Well, you can see where this is going, can't you? I'll spare you any more of that, though. And it could all have been avoided if Lady Godiva would have had the courtesy and the good sense to call her own husband.
Oops, the film broke. 1 second.
I just don't understand what is amiss with our young people today. They just dangle about, playing their lutes and singing songs against jousts and pillories. It's just downright unmedieval. It attacks the very basis of our feudal way of life. Before long, they'll even be attacking our educational system. They'll even be claiming the earth is round. For something just as revolutionary and rather irresponsible.
You know, it's a funny thing about not answering your phone promptly. There is absolutely nothing in the world that's good that can come of it. Every unanswered ring registers in the attitude of the caller. At best, the caller will only be irritated. At worst, the caller will hang up and mutter. And you all know what happened in Coventry. One ignored telephone call, and the great-granddaddy of all protest movements was given birth. Here's another thing. The telephone itself is only as accurate as the person who uses it. I mean, a lot of follow-ups in communications occur because messages aren't recorded accurately.
Paul Revere Limited. No, Mr. Revere is not in right now. May I take a message? Right. To if I see. To what, sir? A lantern? I don't believe we have them in stock. You might try Ben Franklin. Oh, all right. 2 if I see, and 1 if I land. And is that a lantern too, sir? Then you need 3 lanterns. I should forget the lanterns and just remember the message. Right. I've got it. Tell Mr. Revere to forget about the lantern.
So, if you don't want to alter the course of history, which is what you're going to be doing if you record a message incorrectly, then always keep a pad and pencil handy by the phone. Facts only exist as they're remembered. Oh, by the way, a lot of people goof up by dialing incorrectly. This is something most people don't know about dialing. When you dial, the number is dialed on the return trip. In other words, when you force the dial back, you just may foul up the works. So, always dial firmly and let the dial return by itself. Of course, if you have the new touch-tone phone with a push button, well, you're way ahead of the game. Remember to look the numbers up before you dial, and you'll save yourself valuable time. And while you're at it, you might jot it down in your own personal directory. Excuse me. Hello, this is Bob Newhart. Yes, Miss Beanstalk. It's about your boy Jack. He took your cow and traded it for a handful of beans. Gee, I don't know, Mrs. Beanstalk. I never did see your cow. Well, I'm sure it was a fine cow. And the beans are crummy. But magic. The cow wasn't magic, was it, Mrs. Beanstalk? No, but the goose was. What goose is that, Mrs. Beanstalk? The one that lays the golden eggs. The one Jack is going to steal from the giant? No, I don't know where you went wrong either, Mrs. Beanstalk. Would I call the giant and get him not to press charges? Gee, I hate to get mixed up with giants, Mrs. Beanstalk. Well, I'm sure you gave your son lots of love, too. And cookies, and we can't forget the cow, right? Fine, I'll give him a call. I'll get right back to you. I'm sure you were a good mother, Mrs. Beanstalk. Right, goodbye. Now, what the heck do you say to a giant? Well, here goes. I'll dial direct. Nobody, not even giants, are out of reach of the direct dial call.
Fee-fi-fo, fum. This is Billy Bob Giant speaking.
Well, at least he identified himself on the phone. That's good telephone usage rule number 1,234. And a giant that practices rule 1,234 can't be all bad. Oh, by the way, don't do what I just did.
Hello, Mr. Giant. This is Bob Newhart. Yeah, listen, I had this sort of a goofy call from a Mrs. Beanstalk. Yeah, she thought maybe you could sort of keep her basically good boy from going bad.
Now, why should I do that?
Well, see, this Beanstalk lady says that her kid, this Jack, is a goose napper. He's going to get your goose.
Look, man, I haven't got time to fool with it.
You know, that is really an irritating thing. To the caller, there is no such thing as an unimportant telephone call, or else he wouldn't have taken the time and the trouble to call in the first place. Now, it might seem unimportant to you, but to the guy on the other end of the line, it's something else again. Usually he wants help of some kind. Well, give him that help, even if it's merely a moment or two of human courtesy. In the long run, your kindness or helpfulness will always be rewarded in one way or another. Communication itself is a sharing. The telephone, when used properly, is a means of making that sharing instantaneous and meaningful. The funny thing is, most of the things we do wrong on the telephone are completely unintentional. And one of the biggies in this category is what I call the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndrome. You know, you may be pleasant as all get out all day long, and then when we get on the phone, we become another person entirely. It's sort of like this.
La 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 la. We'll sing you a story of Jekyll and what was his name? Mr. Hyde. In real life we're Jekylls and wonderful, but on the phone we may be Mr. Hyde. La 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 la. So we'll sing you a story, a telephone song of all manner of manners and things. You may think you are Jekyll and then prove it wrong.
And be Mr. Hyde
when the telephone rings.
And be Mr. Hyde when the telephone rings.
So, how can you be Dr. Jekyll all day long, even when you're on the phone? It's really very simple.
I shall call me Lord myself.
Place your own local and long-distance calls, and whenever possible, dial direct. Answer your telephone promptly.
Hello, Lord Coventry here.
Leave word where you're going and when you expect to return, so that your telephone can be properly answered during your absence.
Sorry, Mr. Van Winkle has an appointment out of the office this afternoon. Expect him back at 4:30, 20 years from Thursday.
Take messages accurately.
Oh, 1 if by land and 2 if by sea. Yes, sir. I'll give him the message. I'll put it in his saddlebag.
And remember to answer your own phone.
No, pardon me, sir. Let me catch the phone. General Washington here. Yes, Colonel Hamilton.
Identify yourself when you answer the phone.
T-5-0 phone. This is Billy Bob Giant speaking.
Be sure to transfer calls properly.
That would be scaling ladders, battering rams, and catapults. I will connect you with SL, BR, and C, PDQ.
Always explain why you're leaving the line, and if it's going to take some time, keep them informed of your progress.
Pardon me a minute, Bob. The walls of Jericho are falling, and I've got to put you on hold.
Actually, when you think about it, good telephone usage is just a matter of courtesy and common sense. I think it really adds up to this. When that phone rings, or when you pick it up to call somebody, think of the telephone as a person, a human being capable of giving and receiving assistance and courtesy. When the phone rings, it's not just a bell ringing, it's a person calling. No wires and gadgets and plastic, but flesh and blood and feelings. Respect them as you would your own. Excuse me.
Bob Newhart. Oh, hi, Mr. Bell. No, of course I like you, Mr. Bell. And the telephone, too. Much better than taffied apples. Better than silly putty. Even better than disposable diapers, right.
Wow. So I have other copies of that, so hopefully I'll find a copy that doesn't have a big emulsion scratch down it. That is that green line, or green lines that you saw, is when a scratch is on the side where the emulsion is. The emulsion is the goo that has all the photographic information and the visual information, and so if something gets scratched, it turns out to look green or white. Little black scratches are actually on the base, and that's like a shadow of the light source. Now, there you go. Rest in peace, Bob Newhart. That was a little zany for Bob Newhart, I think, but still pretty entertaining and indicative of who he was and what his career was like. Before he did had his own TV shows. Let's learn how plants help us. Getting back to the more educational stuff from our friends at Coronet. Enjoy.
Steve was not very fond of plants. One of his jobs was to weed the lawn. And it was a job that Steve didn't like very much. The harder it was to get the weeds up, the less Steve liked them, and the more he thought that plants were just a terrible nuisance. But then, who should come along but the mailman? Now, there was nothing so unusual about this, but today there was a postcard for Steve. Steve began to feel happier until he read the card. Dear Steve, do you remember our talk about helpful plants? One of mine has a fine present all ready for you. Come and visit the farm soon. Uncle Ben. Helpful plants. That was just like Uncle Ben. Steve knew there was nothing helpful about weeds. He didn't think there could be such a thing as a helpful plant. But if we look around Steve's front yard, we can find quite a few helpful plants, can't we? Well, by the time Steve had done his weeding for the day, he was curious about what Uncle Ben had for him. So, with Mother's permission, he started off to Uncle Ben's to find out about that helpful plant. But he was still pretty cross about the weeds, so he didn't even notice all the useful plants he was passing on the way. By the time Steve reached the edge of town, he was pretty hot. So he decided to stop and cool off in the shade of a big tree. Shade. That's what trees are good for, Steve thought. And for climbing. And of course, he knew that a tree is a plant. From the tree, he could see Mrs. Jones working in her garden. Of course, that's hard work. But these are helpful plants, aren't they? Vegetables for us to eat. And look, some of them are for sale. Let's see. We eat the roots of some vegetables, potatoes and carrots and beets. And the leaves of others, cabbage and lettuce. Some vegetables grow seeds that we eat, such as beans and corn. We eat the stems of broccoli and celery. And these vegetables we eat are really the seed pods of plants. Steve decided that vegetables are pretty helpful plants. He wondered if Uncle Ben was going to give him some vegetables. Well, he'd just have to go on and find out. But he went slower now, and he kept watching for ways that plants help us. Look, a new house, a house made of wood. And wood, you know, comes from trees. What else could Steve see that was made of wood? There's a picket fence. And the telephone poles. Then Steve thought of another way trees help us. Did you know that paper and cardboard are made from wood? Yes, trees are useful in many ways, aren't they? But surely Uncle Ben didn't mean to give Steve anything made of wood or paper. So he rode on, thinking about helpful plants. Why, look, bicycle tires are made of rubber. Does rubber come from a plant? Rubber trees grow in faraway lands where it is hot and moist. Rubber is made from the sap of these trees. Do you know what plant this is? This is cotton. When the fluffy balls of cotton have been combed, they are spun into thread and woven into cloth. Cotton is made into all sorts of clothing, and strong, long-wearing play clothes, too. Can you think of other kinds of cloth that come from plants? Well, Steve didn't think long about cloth. He saw some cows in a pasture, and he began to think about milk. Now, milk doesn't come from plants. But what are the cows eating? Why, grass, of course. And grass is a plant. Pigs furnish us with meat. And what do they eat? Corn, that's a plant. And chickens that give us fried chicken or scrambled eggs, they eat grain from plants. By the time Steve reached Uncle Ben's farm, he was thinking that plants can be mighty helpful. How many ways do you see that plants are helpful here? The table is made of wood from a what? Steve drank milk from a cow that ate what? And he ate fresh bread made from... Do you know how bread is made? Well, one of the things Uncle Ben grows on the farm is wheat. When the wheat is ripe, it is harvested. The hard, dry seeds are taken from the stalks. At the mill, the wheat seeds are poured into huge machines. They are cleaned, and crushed and ground into tiny, tiny bits of flour. At the end, we can see the sack being filled with flour from the mill. At the bakery, the flour is mixed with milk and butter and yeast. Then it is baked into bread. So you see, we need plants so we can have bread too. But Steve was enjoying his bread and milk so much that he almost forgot why he had come to the farm. But when Uncle Ben came over from the barn, Steve remembered. What was Uncle Ben going to give him? Well, first they looked around the farm together. They looked at the cornfield, where Uncle Ben grew food for his cows for next winter. But Steve didn't want any corn. They looked at the apple orchard and saw how many apples there were on the trees. Steve would agree that the apple tree is a helpful plant, but it wasn't the one Uncle Ben wrote about. Then they looked at some new trees Uncle Ben had planted. But he didn't give Steve a tree. Finally, Uncle Ben showed Steve some plants he had never seen before. They didn't look like much to Steve. They didn't have any berries or seed pods. Do you know what they are? Peanuts. So that was the present one of the helpful plants had for Steve. There were enough peanuts here for a couple of boys. So, after Steve had roasted the peanuts at home, he and his brother enjoyed them. And that's how Steve learned about some of the many ways that plants help us. Now, can you think of other ways?
All right, I get it. I get it. Plants are very useful to us. But I like that letter. He gets a letter that makes him very unhappy from his Uncle Ben. Oh yeah, one of the things, so both this film and then the previous film all deal with communication in a weird way. The first one just is about using the telephone as a communication tool. And I was seeing in the comments lots of some people who were not aware of some of these things and some odd novelties of the fact that, you know, telephone was the way, the easiest way to communicate with people at that time, both personally and in business. And so that film was all about teaching you skills about how to do it effectively. And most people weren't trained on how to answer the phone in a business setting. They learn from personal stuff, and so they learn bad habits. But just the idea of a dial tone, what is that? Or the idea that someone's on the line and you can't call, you get a busy signal, what's that? You know, things have radically changed certainly in my lifespan, as far as the telephone and what it means, going from a telephone to a smartphone or cell phone. How do you communicate? How do you do it right? Etc. Just something to think about. I like showing films that kind of show there's a whole thing that doesn't exist anymore, or that is pretty much rarely used because of other ways to communicate, with email, with messaging, with all this other stuff. All right, one last film. It's about the Pacific States. Enjoy.
The New England states, the Middle Atlantic states, the Southern states, the Midwestern states, the Plain states, the Southwestern states, the Rocky Mountain states, the Pacific states, the United States. The New England states, birthplace of a nation.
We're the early voyagers across the Atlantic, the Pilgrims, Plymouth Rock, Plymouth Plantation, beginnings in the New World. Time-worn mountains, lakes and wooded hills, the sea, industrial beginnings in America. Growth, development, modern New England. But the past is still important in the New England states.
The Middle Atlantic states, urban complex.
We're people, millions of people. People crowded together, living, playing, working. We're industry, heavy and light. Steel, shipbuilding, coal mining, we're movement, mass movement, goods, and people. We're government. We're commerce and trade. But mainly we're people. Millions of people in the big crowded cities in the Middle Atlantic states.
The Southern states, historic lands, new ideas.
Tradition. We're tradition in architecture, in history, an agricultural past, and an agricultural present. Mechanization, specialization, food processing, cotton, and textiles. Forests and furniture, wood pulp and paper, resources that grow and resources that are mined, and from them, chemical processing. The Mississippi, world trade route, river of history. We're growing, in touch with the past, living in the present, looking to the future. Atomic power, space, we're still making history in the southern states.
The Midwestern states, the nation's heartland.
Chicago, marketing, transportation, industry. Big industry. Goods on rich farmlands, crops, cattle, dairy products, farming and industry, transportation and marketing, commodities bought and sold. It all works together here in the Midwest.
The Plain States, meat and grain.
Where there's enough rain, corn. Where there isn't, wheat. Livestock fed by the grain we grow. Technology. And one man doing the work it once took many to do. Mechanization on a big scale. Movement to market. To the cities for processing. Grain. And meat. We feed the nation with meat and grain from the Plain States.
The southwestern states, growth in the desert.
First, we grew on cattle, and then on oil. And we grew a lot. We had cotton, high-grade cotton. To help it grow in dry country, irrigation. Irrigation for fruit, too. Mineral wealth. Spectacular land for touring, for retiring, for living. We're growing under blue skies in the warmth of the Southwest.
The Rocky Mountain states, changing frontier lands.
The mountains. What a treasure we have. What a rich resource. Historic barriers to travel, barriers no more. Strange and beautiful lands. Grazing lands. Forests on the mountains, and minerals inside them. Mining and smelting. Oil and refineries. Streams rushing down the mountainsides to give us power for homes, for industries, irrigation for crops in these dry but rich soils of the Rocky Mountain states.
The Pacific States. Variety and change.
We work using the varied and plentiful resources. In the northern forest, lumbermen. On the sea and rivers, seamen and fishermen. Fruits from the responsive land and mild climate. We irrigate. Water from dams, and dams for power. The Pacific coast, with its weather, vacation lands. We're people and cars and places to go. We're big cities all around the Pacific, north from Washington into Alaska. From the mountains of Alaska across the Pacific to the mountains of Hawaii and its sandy shores. We're travelers, and we attract travelers from all over America to our Pacific states.
The Pacific States. The Rocky Mountain States. The Southwestern States. The Plain States. The Midwestern States. The Southern States. The Middle Atlantic States. The New England States. The United States.
So the name of the file name is Living in Pacific States, but obviously that's not what it was because I was like listening to it and looking over periodically, and I'm like, when are they going to talk about the Pacific States? Like, they're spending a lot of time talking about like every other grouping of states in the United States. So I kind of brought up the file and looked at the title and then realized that it was actually Living in the United States. It was the overarching film. So there you go. That happens. Thanks for joining us today. Very much appreciate it. And thanks for indulging me in watching I'd Rather Like You, Mr. Bell. I knew that I had it, and I had not seen it, so it was the first time for me. If you like what you saw, hit the thumbs up, hit the like button. Those are great ways to support us without sending us money. However, we will happily take your money, and you can donate via the Super Thanks button or via the ko-fi.com/abgeeks or patreon.com/abgeeks. Those are great ways to support us as well. And that money goes towards, I don't know, flash drives. But really it goes towards paying off 7 storage units. That is a big chunk of change that we've taken on this while we do renovation work at the archive. So that money goes to that, and also, you know, coffee too. We'll take that. But everybody have a great rest of your day. As always, wait, nope. 919 Rewind with the devil. This is another image that I found just recently that I forgot we found in a film can, and that's what we do, is we're constantly finding stuff and watching them. Oh yeah, Kevin mentioned this in the I am doing a show in Raleigh on Tuesday, 7:30, at the Alamo Draft House in Raleigh, and we're showing films. It's called Shake Hands with Danger, so obviously we will be showing Shake Hands with Danger, but also other films featuring hands that are dangerous to us or are in danger, or just films about hands. There's some seats, and the thing is, if you sit up front, you'll automatically get a free prize that the people sitting in other rows will not get. So that's something to remember. And also, like the day of, even though it might be sold out if you go the day of, you might see some seats kind of free up. So I know it's hard to work that way, but that has worked for me. Saying like, oh, that movie is sold out, and then, oh, no, there's some seats that just opened up. So anyways, everybody have a great rest of your day and weekend, and we will see you soon. Everybody take care.